Evelyn Harper had lived in the same house for 46 years. The white two-story colonial sat at the edge of a quiet maple-lined street, its porch sagging just slightly with age, its shutters faded by decades of sun. Every creak in the floorboards was familiar to her. Every stain on the kitchen counter carried a memory. The rose bushes out front, still blooming stubbornly every spring, were planted by her late husband, Thomas, the year their daughter was born. At 72, Evelyn moved slowly now, but her mind was sharp. Too sharp, perhaps, for the people who assumed she wasn't. She was a widow of 8 years. Thomas had died quietly in his sleep after a lifetime of consistency, routine, and unspoken responsibility. He had handled the paperwork, as he used to say, bills, investments, legal matters. Evelyn trusted him completely. That trust was something she had never questioned, until recently. It started subtly. Her daughter, Linda, began visiting more often. Too often. At first, Evelyn was grateful. Loneliness crept in during the evenings, and Linda's presence filled the house with noise again. Footsteps, chatter, complaints about traffic, the smell of store-bought coffee. But over time, the tone changed. "You know, Mom," Linda said one afternoon, standing in the kitchen with her arms crossed, "this house is really a lot for you." Evelyn rinsed a teacup slowly. "It's been my home for most of my life." I know," Linda replied quickly, glancing at her home. "But stairs, maintenance, yard work, it's not safe anymore." Evelyn dried her hands carefully on a towel. "I manage." Linda didn't argue. She smiled instead, a thin smile, calculated. That was when her husband, Mark Harper, no relation by blood, had always made Evelyn uncomfortable. He spoke loudly, laughed too hard, and had a way of walking through the house as if it already belonged to him. One evening, he sat at the dining table, tapping his fingers against the wood Thomas had refinished decades earlier. "Evelyn," Mark said, leaning back in the chair, "have you thought about assisted living?" Evelyn looked up sharply. "No." "Well, you should. There are very nice places, full care, meals included, activities." "I don't need care." Linda jumped in quickly. "Mom, it's not about need, it's about planning." Planning. That word stuck with Evelyn long after they left that night. The uninvited changes. Within weeks, things escalated. A man in a navy blazer knocked on her door one Tuesday morning. "I'm here to appraise the property," he said cheerfully. Evelyn blinked. "You're here to what?" He checked his clipboard. "House appraisal, ordered by Mark Harper." Evelyn felt something cold settle in her stomach. "I didn't approve this," she said firmly. The man hesitated. "Well, I was told—" "You were told incorrectly," Evelyn replied, closing the door. Later that day, Linda called. "Mom, why were you rude to the appraiser?" "I didn't invite him." Mark's voice came through the phone next. "Evelyn, this is for your own good." "For my own good," she repeated slowly. "Yes, the house is worth a lot. You could fund years of quality care." Evelyn said nothing. That silence irritated Mark more than anger ever could. Soon, boxes appeared. At first, they were just organizing. Then it was downsizing. Then it became packing. Evelyn returned from a doctor's appointment one afternoon to find her linen closet emptied and labeled boxes stacked in the hallway. "What is this?" she asked. Linda avoided her eyes. "Just preparing." "For what?" "For when you move." "I am not moving." Mark stepped in, voice sharp. "You can't live here alone forever." Evelyn looked at him carefully. "This is my house." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "For now." The desk. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She wandered into Thomas's old study, a room no one else touched. Dust clung lightly to the shelves. His leather chair still held the faint impression of his posture. She opened the desk drawer she hadn't opened in years. Inside were old pens, yellowed envelopes, a faded photograph of the two of them on a beach long ago. And beneath a false wooden panel she had never noticed before, a folder. Her heart began to pound. Inside were documents, legal ones, neatly organized. A will. Not the one she remembered signing together. Evelyn did not confront them immediately. That was the first mistake Linda and Mark made. They assumed silence meant weakness. They assumed age meant confusion. They assumed grief meant ignorance. Instead, Evelyn spent the next several days observing. She moved through her own house like a guest, quiet, unnoticed, careful. She watched which drawers Linda opened, which rooms Mark lingered in. She noticed how they spoke when they thought she wasn't listening. One evening, she overheard Mark in the living room, voice low and impatient. "This place could be on the market in 30 days, he said. "We just need her out." Linda sighed. "She's stubborn." "She's old," Mark snapped. "We'll say it's for her safety." Evelyn stood at the top of the stairs, her hand gripping the banister Thomas had carved himself. Safety. That word again. The nursing home visit. They scheduled the tour without asking her. Linda arrived one morning with brochures and a forced cheerfulness that made Evelyn's skin crawl. "Mom, we're going out today." "Where?" "Just a little drive." They took her to a nursing home on the edge of town, clean, sterile, smelled faintly of disinfectant and boiled vegetables. A woman in scrubs smiled too brightly. "This would be perfect for you, Evelyn." They showed her a small room, a single window, a narrow bed. Linda squeezed her hand. "You won't have to worry about anything." Evelyn looked around slowly. "This is where people come to wait." Mark laughed awkwardly. "That's dramatic." "Is it?" Evelyn asked. No one answered. On the way home, Mark spoke as if it were already decided. "We'll list the house next month." Evelyn stared out the window. "You will do no such thing." Mark's jaw tightened. "We'll talk about it later." But later never came. Crossing lines. The next escalation was bolder. Movers arrived. 2 men stood on her porch with a clipboard and a truck idling at the curb. "We're here to start packing," one said. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. "Who sent you?" "Mark Harper." She closed the door. Minutes later, Mark banged on it from the outside. "You embarrassed us." "You trespassed," Evelyn replied calmly. Linda cried, real tears this time, or practiced ones. "Mom, why are you doing this to us?" "To you?" Evelyn repeated. That night, Mark stopped pretending. "You don't have the capacity to make these decisions anymore," he said coldly. Linda didn't object. Evelyn felt something fracture then, not in her mind, but in her heart. The paperwork threat. The next week, Mark returned with documents, power of attorney forms, guardianship paperwork. "We just need you to sign," he said smoothly. Evelyn read every word. "This gives you control over my finances," she said. Mark shrugged. "Temporary." Linda whispered, "Please, Mom, just trust us." Trust. Evelyn thought of Thomas, of the desk, of the hidden will. She slid the papers back across the table. No. Mark slammed his hand down. "Then we'll do this the hard way." Linda flinched, but said nothing. That silence told Evelyn everything. The calm before the storm. That night, Evelyn returned to the study. She reread the document slowly. Thomas had planned for this. Every signature, every safeguard, every contingency. There was a letter tucked into the folder, written in his steady handwriting. If you are reading this, it means someone is trying to take what is not theirs. Do not be afraid. Evelyn pressed the letter to her chest. For the first time in months, she slept. The movers came back on a Thursday morning. This time, they didn't knock politely. A large truck pulled up to the curb just after 9. Its engine rumbled like a threat. 2 men stepped out, followed closely by Mark, clipboard in hand, wearing the confident smile of someone who believed the outcome was already decided. Linda arrived minutes later, eyes red, face tense. Evelyn watched from the hallway mirror as they approached the door. She did not panic. She did not rush. She poured herself a cup of tea. When she opened the door, Mark spoke first. "We're here to finish this." Evelyn looked past him at the truck, then back at his face. "Finish what?" "The move," he said flatly. "We've booked your room. Paperwork's ready." Linda whispered, "Mom, please don't make this harder." Evelyn stepped aside. "Come in," she said. Mark grinned. The performance. They moved through the house like conquerors. Mark pointed, the movers followed. "That dresser goes, those books, the china." Evelyn sat in her armchair, hands folded, watching them pack pieces of her life into cardboard. Neighbors slowed as they passed outside. Whispers started. Linda hovered nervously. "Maybe we should slow down." Mark ignored her. "Sign this," he said, shoving a form toward Evelyn. She looked at it, then looked up. "Not yet." Mark leaned in. "Don't play games." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Oh, I'm not." The folder. She stood, slowly, deliberately. She walked into the study. Mark scoffed. "What now?" Evelyn returned, carrying a thick folder. She placed it gently on the dining table. "Before you touch anything else," she said, "we need to talk." Mark rolled his eyes. "About what?" "Ownership." The word landed heavier than she expected. Mark laughed. "This house is being sold." "No," Evelyn said, "it is not." Linda frowned. "Mom, what are you saying?" Evelyn opened the folder. Deeds, statements, legal seals. She slid one document toward Mark. "Read the name." His smile faded. He flipped pages faster. His face changed. Linda leaned in. "Mark?" Evelyn spoke calmly. "Thomas owned this house outright. No liens, no debt. Upon his death, it passed to me." Mark swallowed. "And," Evelyn continued, "he owned 5 rental properties, 2 commercial buildings, and the apartment you live in." Silence. Linda's breath caught. "That's not possible." Evelyn slid the deed across the table. Linda read the address. Her knees buckled. The shift. Mark laughed nervously. "This doesn't change anything." "Oh, it does," Evelyn replied. She pulled out one final document, an eviction notice addressed to Mark, effective immediately. Linda looked up horrified. "Eviction?" Evelyn met her eyes. "You live in my property." Mark's voice rose. "You can't do this." "I already have." The mover stopped. The room held its breath. Mark turned red. "You planned this." Evelyn nodded. "Thomas did." The mask falls. Mark exploded. "You manipulative old—" Linda shouted, "Stop!" Mark turned on her. "This is your fault." The words hit Linda like a slap. She looked at him, really looked at him. The tone, the rage, the entitlement. Evelyn watched silently. Linda whispered, "You said it was for Mom's good." Mark sneered, "I said what you needed to hear." That was the moment Linda broke. Mark didn't leave the house quietly. He slammed doors as he went, cursed at the movers, and shouted threats into his phone while pacing the front lawn like a caged animal. Neighbors stopped pretending not to watch. "This isn't over," he yelled back at the house. "You hear me?" Evelyn stood just inside the doorway. "I hear you," she said. Mark froze. For the first time, he realized she was not afraid. The counterattack. Within 48 hours, the retaliation began. Evelyn received letters, legal-sounding, aggressive. Mark was contesting the will, claiming undue influence, claiming diminished capacity. Linda showed up late that night, soaked from the rain, eyes swollen from crying. "He says you manipulated Dad," Linda whispered. Evelyn handed her the letter Thomas had written. Linda read it slowly. Each line dismantled the story Mark had told her for years. Her hand shook. "He planned everything," Linda murmured. "Yes," Evelyn replied, "including this." The apartment. The eviction notice reached Mark's landlord association. Locks were scheduled to be changed, utilities transferred. Mark lost control fast. He showed up drunk one night, pounded on Evelyn's door. "Fix this!" he screamed. Evelyn called the police. Linda watched from the sidewalk. She didn't defend him. That was another crack. The lawyer. Evelyn's attorney was calm, methodical. "This is airtight," he said. "Your husband anticipated coercion." Mark's claims collapsed in weeks. Evidence spoke louder than anger. The judge dismissed the challenge. Mark was ordered to vacate the apartment. Linda's realization. Linda stayed with Evelyn temporarily, sleeping in her childhood room, surrounded by things she had once taken for granted. One night, she broke. "He isolated me," she sobbed. "From you, from everyone." Evelyn held her. "He needed control," she said, "and he used fear." Linda nodded. "I was afraid to lose him." Evelyn whispered, "You almost lost yourself." Mark disappeared from their lives the way he had entered them, loudly at first, then all at once. There were angry voicemails, threatening emails, promises of lawsuits that never came. Each message grew weaker, less certain, until eventually silence. The man who had tried to take everything had nothing left to stand on, and the house grew quiet again. Not the tense quiet of fear, but the deep, familiar quiet Evelyn remembered from long ago. The aftermath. Linda stayed longer than she planned. At first it was temporary, just until things settled. But something about being back in her childhood home unraveled memories she had buried. Sunday breakfasts, her father reading the paper, her mother humming while folding laundry. One afternoon, Linda found herself standing in the study. She touched the desk. "I didn't even know this room mattered to him," she said softly. Evelyn replied, "He knew you'd come back someday." Linda broke down. "I almost sold everything he built." Evelyn took her hand, but she didn't. The letter. Weeks later, Evelyn gave Linda a second envelope Thomas had left behind. It was addressed simply, "For Linda when she is ready." Linda read it alone. It spoke of forgiveness, of patience, of faith that truth reveals itself in time. When she came downstairs, her eyes were red, but peaceful. "He never stopped loving me," she whispered. No, he never did. Choices. Linda filed for divorce quietly. No drama, no revenge, just clarity. She enrolled in therapy, reconnected with old friends Mark had pushed away, started working again, this time for herself. One evening, she said, "I want to earn what I have." Evelyn smiled. "That's all I ever wanted for you." The house remains. Evelyn kept the house. She restored it slowly, not to increase its value, but to honor its history. The rose bushes bloomed again. The desk stayed where it was, and every evening she sat on the porch, watching the light change the same way it had for nearly half a century. Neighbors waved, children laughed down the street. Life continued. The final scene. One quiet morning, Linda joined her mother on the porch. "I used to think strength was taking control," Linda said. Evelyn replied, "Strength is knowing you already have it." Linda rested her head on her mother's shoulder. The house stood behind them, unmoved, undefeated, just like Evelyn.